welcome back to the Veterans Corner. My name is Chuck Woodin, and I'll be your host, as always, for this show. This is actually a two-part show. For those that missed the first part, we had a very, very interesting and informative conversation. Our topic is actually women veterans, women in service. It all surrounds an event that's coming up that we're going to be talking about at the end of this show. Toward the end of this show. It's the 100th anniversary of Women in Service. What I like to do, for those that didn't see part one, I like to introduce our panel. Special guest, actually to my left, is Gary Wallace. Gary's a Middletown police captain. Yes. He was also in the Navy, operations specialist, second class. And welcome to the show, Gary.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Chuck.
To my right, you went first last time. You're going to go last this time. To my far right, we have Adele Hodges, retired colonel with the United States Marine Corps. She's the senior vice commander for the Marine League, the Marine Corps League, the Connecticut Marine Corps League.
The department, yes.
Department, I'm sorry. But welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Glad to be
welcome
here.
back, Dennis. Dennis Salzer is was a senior chief, electronics technician in the United States Navy.
Yes, sir.
Retired. And he's also, we missed it the first show, you got the cap on and all that, from the American Legion, Post 16 down in Shelton.
Yes.
He is the assistant chaplain at the post.
Yes.
I promoted him for a little bit earlier, and we demoted him back to where he is. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the show. And I'm sure that this show is going to be just as informative as the first one, and then some. Actually, I mentioned the branches you were in, Navy, Marine Corps, and on behalf of the viewers and the crew here at the Veterans Corner, we want to say thank you very much for your service.
Thank
Very
you.
welcome.
And thank you for yours.
Yes.
Thank you. We've got so much to touch on. Let's just jump into this. I think the first question that we want to ask, I think I'll direct that to you, Dennis, is during the time you served, what kind of tasks did you observe women doing in the Navy?
Did we cover that last one?
Actually, you know what?
Yeah.
It might help if I put
put those glasses
I should
on,
probably
Chuck.
put these on. That's the next question. Here we go. There we go. Dennis, you were on active duty during the Vietnam War. Did any women serve in Vietnam?
Yeah, I didn't, but there were women that served in Vietnam. Most of the roles, if not all of them, were medical. And it's interesting, I couldn't remember if there were 6 or 8 women's names on the Vietnam Wall, but there were 8. So I had to Google it today. And when I Googled it, it said, why were there only 8 women's names on a Vietnam Wall? I said, well, gee, that's a stupid question, because only 8 were killed in Vietnam. Yeah. So sadly, but 8 were, but they served, and I mean, they had a tough job there. They were taking care of those guys that are coming right off the combat line. But I have an interesting story. Back during, when Shelton hosted the Vietnam Moving Wall, I met a couple. Previous Army officer, and his wife was an Army officer in the Nurse Corps. And they were married in the Vietnam War, and they both they convinced the higher-ups to serve together in Vietnam, and where they worked together, and they lived in a hut by themselves as a married couple in a combat zone. She was a nurse, he was a combat officer. Believe it or not, he was out on a chopper. He got wounded. They were medevacing him back, or just bringing him back on a helicopter he was doing his mission on. He was wounded twice more while they were leaving, so he got 3 wounds. They brought him back to the field hospital, and it's his wife that saved his life.
Wow.
Honest to God. I don't remember their names, but it was such an honor and pleasure to talk to them, and that's probably out of all the stories that come out of Vietnam, that's probably the best one, I would tend to
And you
think.
don't hear about it.
You don't hear about
You don't hear
his
about
wife
that.
saved his life, her own husband's life in Vietnam. So that's one story I'll never forget. I wish I could remember a few more details in their names, but lovely couple.
I'm sure she didn't let him forget that for Thanksgiving dinners.
Yeah. What's my birthday? Yeah.
But no, there's so many stories like that from all the conflicts that you don't hear about. Have you observed anything in recent news clips that highlight women who served in the military?
Well, you do see things from time to time, but I think the most recent one was last week, and I swear it's sad that a human being was lost in a Southwest flight. It breaks my heart that that poor woman lost her life and her beautiful family to leave behind. However, my heart just beamed with pride when they said that that pilot was a previous naval pilot in Desert Storm, and I checked out a few things about her. And she handled herself so professionally and so calmly, bringing that aircraft back and saving all the rest of the people on board. And I felt like she was my own sister or daughter. I was so proud of her, and not only of her being a Navy pilot. She was a Navy pilot in Desert Storm when it wasn't easy for women to get into combat roles. She flew the F-18 Hornet, and we went out as the Super Hornet, but back then I don't think they had the Super Hornet yet, which is a longer aircraft. But the same thing, that is the #1 fighter that the Navy has, both carrier-borne and shore bases. She flew that aircraft as a fighter pilot in Desert Storm. That's a lot to be said. But not only does it show that women can perform and perform under extreme duress. I mean, in combat, and then an issue where an aircraft engine blows apart. But it highlights to the general public that military training certainly carries on, the effects of military training carries on into the civilian world, into other jobs. So I think it says a lot for our military as a whole, as well as for women serving in the military. I was just so proud of her.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody that serves in whatever branch it was, you do carry on that training, the discipline, and everything else in your daily lives. So I mean, definitely a credit to her occupation and who she stands for.
Yeah.
I mean, that's cool, calm, and collect.
Exactly.
Yeah. She's got a lot to feel good about.
Yeah, I actually had one thing to add to that. Last year in November, so it was November 2017, I had the honor of going to an event at the Convention Center in Hartford, where they were inducting women into the Connecticut Hall of Fame. And it was my first time going. It was such a great event. There were 3 women in particular that were kind of the headliners, and then there were a number of other women who were kind of honorable mentions. But 2 of the 3 that really stood out for me, one was a Captain Kristen Griest, I believe you pronounce her name, and she was the first infantry officer in the United States Army, and also had graduated from Ranger School. And so they were able to show a nice video clip of kind of a summary of her life leading up to her service, and it was so impressive. And unfortunately, she couldn't be there that night because she was training with her unit, and it just really showed the dedication that she really didn't want to leave training, and because all of the people serving under her, were there, and so she couldn't be with us, but she did send a nice video message, which was really impressive. One of the other women who I knew personally, who I was actually there to support, was a Regina Rush Kittle, and Regina who's now retired from the Connecticut State Police. She was the first African-American female to rise to the rank of major, and when she retired. And so that, very impressive, but Regina was also a command sergeant major in the United States Army Reserves. And so they also did the same kind of honors and video clip of her lifetime. So not so much a news media clip, but it was just an event that I happened to attend. And it was so well attended, if you ever get a chance, you have to check it out. So it was the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame.
And that's a annual event.
I believe it is annual,
Yeah.
yes.
Just, I mean, I know they have the big ceremony up there every year for the Hall of Fame.
Very impressive.
Dennis, I'm not going to leave you alone.
It's all right.
What are women in the armed forces referred to today? I know with the Navy it was WAVES. WAX was that Army? That was Army.
That was wax. Women are.
And then I've got two others here. WAM. You lost me there.
Okay.
Help me out.
I'll help you out. In the days of World War II, I guess it was, the term WAVE came from, for the Navy, as women available for enlisted volunteer service. Then WAX, I believe, is Women Army Corps.
Yeah, I think it's Army Air Corps.
WAMs, Women Marines. And when I first came in the Navy in 1968, they were still considered WAVES and all that, WAMs and WAX and all that. Then later on in the 70s, because WAVES indicated that women were just enlisted, that wasn't true. There were women officers, so they called them WINS, Women in the Navy. And then as time went by, that just sort of quietly disappeared, and there's no special name. A sailor is a sailor, a Marine is a Marine. If one's
Soldier.
female, one's male. There are no special names anymore. That's gone by the wayside, and it's fine. When I was serving, and now I look at the person as being a soldier or a sailor or a Marine or an airman, and not. Well, that's a woman soldier. That's a woman sailor. You don't think that way when you don't think that way anymore.
Yeah, well, I know that during when I first came in, when I first went into the Marine Corps, we were called WMs, Women Marines, and during I think the early 80s, the Commandant came out and said, there's no longer WMs and male Marines, they're Marines. Yeah. We're all Marines.
Exactly.
And I think that goes to how the individual services incorporated them separate but equal, women and males into their services, to make it one service. And I think that started in the early 80s, that, there's no longer women and males, it's all one organization.
One unit.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's how, and that started the trend on women in being incorporated in the different MOSs and how they were going to, military occupational specialties, and how they're going to interact with their male counterparts. So how they're going to be treated by their male counterparts.
This question right here, I'm just going to throw this one out there. Did women function in management or middle management positions, and what did you observe and think of their performance in these positions? I don't know if that was that yours? It was yours.
Yeah, but it's up for grabs. Anybody wants it.
Yeah, and actually, you would be able to.
And it depends on the period of time.
Yeah.
Women were, they were not upper management except for women, amongst women when we first World War II to literally the early 70s and mid 70s, and then that's when that changes. We had a separate organization for women. We had the Women Marine units, and they went to work with their male counterparts, but they went back to their women battalions, but that all went away in the mid 70s, where we became, if we had a battalion and women worked in those battalions, they became parts of those battalions. So, but in those separate organizations, we actually had a separate rank structure, women got promoted on a separate board when we were being promoted in the officer rank. We had a separate board from the males. And then that, I think Title X just ripped that, and said, we're all Marines, we're all sailors and soldiers, and there'll be one board to look at all of them, so all of us. So that glass ceiling started to break, where women started to be promoted to senior ranks. Although there were senior ranks, they were very few because they were just in those women organizations. But as we were being more incorporated into the Marine Corps and Navy, you could see women start to break that glass ceiling and take on more management positions, so to speak.
There's a question that we don't have written down here, but it's something that I've heard from our very first female department commander for the American Legion. Remember Marianne? Had to be, time flies now. It was
I
right
don't know her
around
name yet, she's too new.
2011, somewhere around there. But she had mentioned the fact that, we've been highlighting everything that women have done in the service and all the good things, and they're part of the team and everything. But there's a lot of women out there, from what I understand, that don't feel like they're veterans.
Exactly.
And I've actually witnessed that from a good friend who's, whenever we would get in front of people, and I hope she's not going to be watching this. I didn't mention what branch, I didn't mention anything. I would always.
But you know who you are.
You know who you are. I would always point out. I would always, point out that she is a veteran, and I would always get the evil eye afterwards. But I personally have witnessed that.
Yeah.
What's causing that?
Well, that's because of these separate but equal organizations, the Women Army Corps, the Women Marines, and how we got promoted. And that's another reason why we want to recognize those World War II women veterans, because they don't feel like they're veterans, even though they served and they were, they deployed in some cases to the islands and to Europe with their male counterparts, and they did their job and they supported the fight. They still don't feel like they're veterans because they weren't recognized as veterans. And when they got out, they got out of the service, they went back home, they started their families. Their husbands were the heroes, and they kind of faded into the background. So they don't understand that they are veterans as well.
There's one woman that I know that spent most of her time stateside. Mm-hmm. And I had to explain to her that you raised your right hand just like I did, and if it wasn't for the role that you played in whatever position you played
exactly.
here, whoever's on the front lines, they couldn't do their job.
Exactly.
So we're all in the same team, just different positions, mm-hmm. and it's important that everyone's working together mm-hmm. to get the final outcome.
And I think most veterans are proud to be veterans. And one of the things that I'm just thinking about as we have this conversation is sometimes men and women, but could be mostly women depending on the time, as Adele said, when you have served and depending on what you went through during service, could have a lasting effect on how you feel as a veteran. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if you went through a lot of struggle, if you went through a lot of things that made it difficult for you to either do your job or to get promoted, if you had some of those difficulties, once you left service, that may be something you want to just kind of put behind you. Yeah. And that could be one reason why some women, other than the mm-hmm. reasons you stated, could feel that way. Yeah. I know that even today, I talk to many veterans from the Persian Gulf era, and it's difficult for them to do anything veteran-related. I think veterans who not necessarily are in need of the service of, say, the American Legion or other veteran services, but it's at some point it clicks, and you say, listen, I want to be part of that. I want to, make it known that I'm proud to be a veteran. but for some reason people wait till later in life. And someone approached me earlier on and said, hey, join the Legion, this is what we do. And so that's what I try to do as well. But I think some of the struggles that people went through while in service could be a reason why they don't necessarily identify with being that proud veteran. Just a thought.
Post 209 in Forestville, which is a fairly new post. It is a new post. It was just formed in 2014. They're a sponsor of this show. And I happen to personally be the founder of that post. And one thing that we've expressed to all our members is to make sure that all veterans are welcome here. Mm-hmm. All veterans. We don't want this to be all guys. And I've stressed over and over again to our membership that we need women members here. They need to feel like they're part of it.
Exactly.
Which they are. But I just figured I'd throw that out there because it was on if I didn't mention it then, I know I'd forget about it and the time would have ran out. But I thought that was an important thing to touch on because I've heard it and I've actually seen it.
Good point.
But Dennis, I just want to keep picking on you.
A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, we'll start this question off with you. In most recent years, since you have retired from the Navy, what have you observed in women's roles in the military as compared to what you experienced when you were active duty?
Well, we touched upon it
I was going to say
before.
we touched a lot of
they've grown into combat roles, and now they're even having women. I don't know where this particular program starts, but they've started to have women on submarines, which they never did before.
Yeah.
So that's in its infancy at this point.
So we make sure that we have enough time. I know we touched on this event at the end of part one of this two-part series, and we want to make sure that we definitely have enough time to go over everything that needs to be covered on this. There's an event coming up. When is it? June 10th of this year, 2018. We got to make sure we say that because a lot of times these shows are shown over, in the future. But it is June 10th, 2018, and it's celebrating the 100th anniversary of Women in Service. So, who wants to? I think Adele, you were pretty well versed on this event, weren't you?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is an event where we're like Chuck said, we're honoring all women veterans, but we're primarily focusing on World War II women veterans, and we're trying to reach out to all veterans and all individuals throughout the state of Connecticut to bring those women to light so that we can honor them on June 10th. June 10th. I'm sorry. It's so that they were recognized. These women they got out of the military, they went back home, they started their families, and they, as you said, they don't consider themselves veterans. And some of them did not receive their World War II victory medals, and we're going to provide them with the World War II victory medal, and as well as the Connecticut War Medal. And we want to honor these women.
Yeah, I think one of the questions I had here, it's why is this event important? I think we already covered that.
Yes.
It's extremely important. How are we attempting to locate these women?
We're reaching out through the media. We're actually we're going to nursing homes. We're going to senior citizens daycare centers, and we're reaching out to churches and anybody that would be a focal point for the women of that age.
Town clerks as well.
Town clerks, exactly.
Right.
We're trying to see
Tax assessment.
how tax assessment to see who's registered as a veteran. Yes.
Just to amplify on what Adele was saying, this particular ceremony, we're going to be honoring World War II veterans, because they're up in their 90s, and we want to take care and honor as many of them as we can from the state of Connecticut as soon as we can. However, we are collecting data on other female veterans, and in the future, maybe into next year, we hope to have another ceremony honoring all the other veterans, because it's just impossible to do at this one point in time when we're trying to capture this special group of the greatest generation. It's just unmanageable to get everybody at this point. So even next year, we're going to probably it's probably going to go into next year where we will have another ceremony, and it will probably be titled something similar, but maybe this would be the beginning of the second century of women in the armed forces, because we just don't have enough time to manage it all this year.
Well, you have to make sure that you get in touch with me, say 3 months at a time, and we'll definitely have to have you back and highlight that show.
Sure.
Event, rather. I was going to say, how many have we located so far?
Right now, I think we've located around 20.
20?
20 of them, yes.
Well, I got another 3 that I'm working with besides the 20,
Okay,
so which I didn't talk to Sal about yet. So,
yeah. Well, we're once again just like the first show. This flies.
Winding down.
I mean, there's so much. I mean, this has been a great 2-part show. This is one of the first shows actually where we've actually just had a great conversation, going around the table. So I mean, I really want to thank the 3 of you for being here.
Well, we're honored to be here.
it's been our pleasure. When it comes to talking about veterans,
Exactly.
it's hard to limit it to just a half an hour.
Well, that's what this show's about. It's to get the word out. And like I told Sal, and I told you,
Yes.
use this show as a vehicle to get your word out, and that's what we're here for. There's so many organizations that do great things, for the veterans and their families.
Cool.
And they don't always get the publicity that they deserve. But
Exactly.
with that being said, another show comes to an end. and like I said, whenever you have something coming on, coming up in the future, we don't have to wait till next year.
Right.
Glad we made the connection, Chuck.
It would be great to have you back. Well, that's about all the time we have for this episode of the Veterans Corner. We hope you've enjoyed the show and found it informative. I'm sure you did find it informative. This was, once again, a great 2-part series. Special thank you to our guests. It's been an honor. It truly has.
You're welcome.
Thank
you.
Thank you
for having us.
My name is Chuck Woodin. You're watching the Veterans Corner. Please have a good night.